Elder Race, Part 8, Our Fall.
Shilin, Council Station, Andoran Space. 57 days after Androm's folly. Shilin sat calmly upon her seat before the council. The three major races of the council were present, as well as every other representative for the member races. They sat facing her in a loose semicircle, with the rest of the vast enclave filled with an eclectic mix of member races. From what she understood of the government structure of the council races, there were three powerful members who served as administrators and dictators in times of strife, whilst most major decisions were left to the votes of the member races. Shilin felt a surge of pride as she looked upon them all. This was humanity's doing. These were the seeds that humanity had sown in fertile ground. She had spent a month in her stealth ship researching the various characteristics of the races arrayed before her. Here were the Borst, calm, clever, and peace-loving. They were masters of scientific advancement and innovation, easily recognized as the technological powerhouse of the council. There were the Pyrians, who were loyal, hardworking, and brave. They were pillars of strength for the council. When all else crumbled and fell, it was the Pyrians who would stand as a bulwark for their allies. There sat the Andorans, sly, slippery, and focused on the greater good. Their agility could be applied to their combat, political, and economic prowess. There was an endless sea of others behind them, each a representation of the best that their race had to offer, each a symbol of the greatness that humanity could achieve. Shilin's eyes fell on the Karok delegate, her scaled features twisted into a vision of hate. Shilin's pride in human achievement was immediately snuffed out. Where the others were a symbol of greatness, she mused, there stood the symbol of our failure. Our evil. Despite the fact that it was Androm Winchester and his house of killers who had committed countless atrocities against the Karok people, Shilin was under no illusions as to where the fault truly lay. They had allowed one madman to single-handedly destroy an entire species. Humanity as a whole was at fault. However, it was a debt that they would pay at another time. For now, they had a greater purpose. The taint had returned, and it had to be stopped.
I must say, I am curious as to why you are here, Shilin of humanity transcendent.
Croaked the old and withered Andoran who sat before her.
Your reclamation armada was stopped in its tracks. Your attempts to subdue us or exterminate us have failed. The only reason you are here, and not being thrown into the nearest star, is our desire for knowledge. We will not accept any terms of surrender. We will not accept a treaty of any kind. If diplomacy was your intention, I would advise you to abandon it forthwith. Your sole purpose inside of this enclave is to answer any and every question posed to you by the Council with truthful sincerity. If you do not do so, if you resist in any way, you will die. Do I make myself clear?
Shilin regarded the old Andoran with a calm and steely eye. Despite his appearance, Shilin had outlived him by centuries. She was so old that keeping track was an exercise in futility. His attempts to frighten her into submission failed to impress her in the slightest. She knew who he was. His name was Arkutu. He had served his people faithfully for 45 years. He was the reason that the Ams existed. Whilst she was not impressed with his attempts at intimidation, she was impressed by his political and diplomatic acumen. He had built a wall that kept humanity out. That in itself was amazing.
I understand, Counselor Arkutu. I will do my best to answer any questions that you may have. But it's also time for me to tell you a story that is very pertinent to your situation. Believe it or not, humanity is not united in the pursuit of your conquest. That desire lies at the feet of a single man who has fooled an entire species. We believe that you would need to be guided along like children in the pursuit of greatness. I see now that you do not need us. We all see it. It's different now. We need you to save us.
The Karok delegate surged to her feet.
You'll be damned. You'll all be damned before we help you. Billions of lives lie at your feet. The Karok will see your filth wiped clean from the galaxy before we lift a single finger to aid you. You are our enemy.
Shilin nodded gravely.
As it should be. You represent our greatest failure. We failed to stop that man then, and now it is too late. We will owe the Karak people a great debt until the end of time. But I'm here to tell you of a far greater threat to the galaxy at large.
There was silence for a moment.
Explain yourself.
Breslevis, Drigl's successor to the Bourse delegation, crackled through his face mask. Jilin crossed her legs and brushed at invisible dust on her deep blue pant legs before continuing.
Have any of you ever heard of the Calamity?
Carlos. 57 days after Androm's folly. Human containment facility. Ildor, Andora's second moon. Carlos had never known tranquility like this before. Every day he and Adam would wake early and work in their garden. Then Carlos would run and exercise for an hour or two. Then it was back to the garden. Sometimes they wouldn't talk for days. Other days were filled with Adam's garbled and joyful accounts of events that Carlos couldn't begin to understand. Partly because Adam made no sense, partly because Carlos had no context with which to view them. For Carlos, the very idea of peace was a novel one. His whole life had been spent in preparation for the moment of his death, or the moment he would take life. The idea of growing something, to build life up from the foundations, was something both completely new and infinitely precious to him. The atmosphere soothed him, and Adam's kindness was slowly healing the scars that had once been his connection to Terrian rocks. He would never forget them, of course, but now he could think of them without feeling as if his soul was being torn in two. Today was another quiet day. Carlos was under no illusions that Adam's life was one where a bumper crop of dark memories grew, that he could not speak for fear of revealing what he had done. However, Adam's silence communicated pain on a much deeper level than his light and bumbling conversation ever could. Carlos knew what it would mean if Adam were to truly reveal who he was. It would mean the end of all this. Despite their greatest efforts, both Adam and Carlos were merely two swords dreaming of being plows.
Carlos?
Adam asked tentatively.
Yeah?
Carlos replied, pausing from his weeding to look at Adam in surprise. Today was a quiet day. Adam did not talk on quiet days.
Do you know about the bad things?
I have here documents and historical accounts that will prove every word I am about to say to you as the unequivocal truth.
Shilin began.
These were sealed away from even our own people after the awakening, so that the knowledge of these events would not taint the new future we were about to build. We now know that this was a mistake.
Shilin paused, knowing full well that she had every delegate's attention. Despite the obvious and well-deserved antagonism that humanity had earned, the client races all had little to no knowledge of human history or culture. This information was highly valuable to them, and Shilin needed them to know it. Everyone needed to know the danger.
Before the Calamity, some 1.4 million years ago, humanity inhabited the galaxy peacefully with a myriad of different races. When I say peacefully, I omit the occasional border disputes and petty wars that so often flare up between neighbors. We were peaceful in the way that any conglomeration of races was peaceful, without any significant loss of life due to violence. This was, of course, before the advent of a parasitic organism, colloquially known as the taint, a parasite that could bend the host's will to be subservient to its own. This organism could exert control over sentient beings in one of two ways: either through microbial infection or through psychic assault. Those infected have no chance of recovery or being cured. They must be culled from the population. Those who are under psychic control have been mentally subdued by an individual who is tainted and can be freed by killing the controlling tainted one.
Why was there a need to go to such lengths?
Arkutu rasped.
Because,
Shilin continued.
Otherwise the tainted one will kill you. They will not only kill you, they will burn down your home and torture the survivors. They will gladly slaughter every inhabitant of a planet on a whim, if they have the means to do so. They will enslave your children and rape your women. They will detonate the star in your home system and gladly perish along with you, if it means that you will die.
There was shocked silence as Shilin allowed this to sink in.
The taint tore the galaxy apart. Brother against brother, sister against sister. Mothers strangled their sons and stabbed their daughters. Husbands murdered their wives. The whole species sank into chaos and confusion, and things only got worse. The different races withdrew into themselves and began to wage bitter civil wars. tainted fleets against untainted ones. The whole populations were armed and fighting. No one was safe. Everyone was expected to fight. I have seen your histories. You have fought wars with each other. You know how terrible it can be. I just want you to know that everything you have experienced up until this point pales to nothing compared to this. This was a war to end all wars. This was a war that ended the galaxy.
I was made to fight the bad things, see?
Adam said softly, so soft that Carlos could barely hear. They squatted side by side in the dirt, staring intently at the fertile earth.
I was the first. Grown in a test tube I was, just like you. They took things from me, made me a tool. They grew me and the others to kill the bad things and wipe them from the galaxy. They made me a monster, so I would kill the monsters that were worse.
Carlos reached forward to rub Adam's back, as shaking threatened to overtake him.
I've got a switch. See? That brings back the old me. The me that can do anything. Can kill anything. I fight it every day. Some days, it's worse than others. That's why I'm so quiet, see? I'm trying to be good, see? I don't hurt no one if they don't hurt me. But we're all hurt. Every single one of us. Those guys, those blue bloods that you hate, they're so cold because they're broken. They've seen things that you wouldn't believe. They've had to do things that no one should have to do. They killed trillions. They've lost everything. You don't believe me? You don't know anything. You don't understand.
Adam shoved Carlos to the ground. Carlos lay there in surprise as Adam towered over him, snarling and panting. Where he was once a weak and sad presence, he was now a menacing promise of violence. He was the sword behind the plow.
We lost the damn galaxy.
The symptoms of the taint are easy enough to see. Erratic behavior, a dark discoloration of the veins around the neck, mouth, and eyes, as well as flashes of yellow within the eyes in stressful or emotional situations. It is important to understand that the tainted individual does not lose any of their memories, knowledge, or expertise. If they so desire, they can still be a functioning member of society, and if they were careful, no one would ever know. However, what is lost is their ability to feel empathy, or any sort of connection with other sentient beings. All of their desires, their dreams, and their emotions are hijacked to serve the parasite's own ends. We were never able to identify an origin point for the taint spread. Worlds seemed to erupt into violence at random across the galaxy. There was no way to contain the spread. We lost contact with the other races early on in the calamity. To this day, I do not know for sure what happened to the other elders. All I know is that when the dust settled, we were alone in a lifeless galaxy.
How did humanity deal with its infestation?
Reslevis asked.
We managed to create a vaccine against microbial infection. We were still vulnerable to psychic control, but an individual could defend themselves against psychic assault through mental training. We used this vaccine, our newly established mental defenses, and a vast array of sensory equipment used to detect influences of the taint to establish green zones, zones where there was no sign of the taint. And we burned the rest with antimatter, bombs, and galaxy lances. We wiped away all life from our sector of space. It appears that the other elders attempted to do the same, but destroyed themselves.
There was silence again.
You purged the galaxy of life?
The Karok delegate choked out.
Yes, it would appear so. We found ourselves alone and suffering from the memories left behind by this event. We did not have the resources to continue on. Every planet was a wasteland, still capable of supporting life, but with no life to support. Humanity existed as a huge flotilla, floating in the vastness of space. Of the trillions that once were, a paltry million or two remained. We were starving. We believed ourselves free of the taint. So in a last-ditch attempt to rebuild the galaxy, each house planted genetic material with the capacity for creating complicated ecosystems, and we hoped sentient life on planets of their choosing within the Orion Spur. We then resigned ourselves to stasis back on our home planet, Earth, awaiting the maturation of our crop. That crop was you.
This is a very nice story, Shilin, but I fail to see its relevance.
said Arkutu.
I'm glad you asked Delegate Arkutu.
Shilin replied.
The sad fact of the matter is that the taint has not left us. It is still very much alive. Androm Winchester, now self-proclaimed Emperor of Man, mastermind of the Karok extinction, is tainted. He will not stop until he dominates all life in the Orion Spur. Fortunately, each and every race planted by humanity, including the new generations of humankind, are genetically immune to microbial infection. That is not the case in terms of psychic subjugation. Androm will be able to psychically dominate millions with the help of wave transmission technology. He will dominate the rest like any other dictator would. When I told you that we need you to save us, I also meant that your people need you to save us as well. If you save humanity, you will save the galaxy.
Pandemonium erupted as every delegate began shouting at once. Shilin observed Arkutu as he calmly began to scroll through the information packet that she had sent to each of them, which included historical documents, accounts, and designs for vaccines and taint detection devices. She needed them all to be ready. With this brilliant being at the helm before her, she knew that they would rally and help humanity in its hour of need. They would be stupid not to. She just hoped that Dmitry Kurchenko and his resistance movement would be able to spread the word to the new generations. Gerard Stevenson. 57 days after Androm's folly. Dicey Riley's, Watkins Trench. Brea, far reaches. Gerard stood before the 50 or so people gathered in the Dicey Riley's basement, awash with the smells of festering yeast, vomit, and stale beer. He was standing on a tiny podium made from crates and splintered pallets. He nervously scratched at his nose with his left hand while holding his beer steady with the other. They all had beers as well, but they remained untouched as they waited for him to start speaking. His mouth was parched. It's funny. He'd never been this nervous, not even when he was waiting in the boarding craft at the AMZ. Oh well, he might as well have a drink. It'll give him the courage to start as well.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Gerard said loudly, automatically falling into the tone of voice he used to command his boys on the field.
welcome to the fucking revolution.
He took a swig, and so did they. Throughout the colonies, Gerard knew that a similar scene was being played out. He'd been in touch with fellow agitators, all of whom had read the materials distributed in secret by the Blue Bloods in hiding. Those cowards were bowing out and leaving the new generations to fight, like always. Fuck him, Gerard thought. Fuck those guys. Gerard smiled before starting the speech he and Molly had spent all night writing. Sure, the Blue Bloods were leaving them to bleed like always, but at least this time, the new generations would be fighting for themselves. And that, Gerard knew, was all that mattered.